Thank you, Serge. Thank you for the great introduction, and thank you all for joining us today. I think this is an incredible, exciting time within the finance sector across the globe, but certainly within France. And I look forward to explaining a lot of what Citrix is recognizing within your market and how we are developing and evolving our own platforms to meet a lot of the trends and possibilities that we're recognizing as we continue to build our own strategies in line with banking, financial services, and insurance. As Serge said, I'm Molly Bausher. I work within our Office of the CTO as a technology strategist. And again, really looking forward to reviewing a lot of the research and content that we've been putting together within the banking and financial services space. Today, my segment is really going to focus on three key areas. Firstly is going to be general market trends, where we've seen most of any industry's trends develop universally across all industries, and how that development comes into our own evolution of our platforms. Specifically, what we're seeing in banking trends, and then the possibilities given said trends. And then after we recognize and ingest all of the trends that we're seeing within that research pool, within that market, what is Citrix's vision within the banking and financial services and insurance sector? Incredibly important as we develop to see the opportunities and the challenges that are going to exist moving forward in the next coming years, and at a very accelerated pace, as I think you all can attest to. So just to start, we're going to go through a few of the general market trends that we're recognizing in the market. And I think most of you on the call can attest to or recognize that a lot of the conversation and chatter and noise within the market, within IT, has been a shift to the cloud and to the mobile era. And that has been true prior to the pandemic for quite some time. It is very much dependent on your government regulations and mandates, and certainly your industry. And I understand that for many organizations, regardless of your mandates from a government perspective, within finance, within banking, it is very difficult to overhaul your entire infrastructure and architecture to the cloud. But elements of it are going to become incredibly important and dependent in a way as we continue to modernize tools that support each industry across the IT spectrum of vendors. So when you're looking at a lot of where we've been as solutions for enterprises, as enterprises are implementing different architecture plans and tool sets for productivity within their employee base and within their business, a lot of those on-site, on-premise infrastructure requirements and then headcount in order to accommodate and improve and monitor said on-prem infrastructure installs are transitioning to the cloud. And for reasons that have indicated and proven over many years that there is evergreen environments that constantly keep any sort of patches or any sort of updates or improvements ongoing continuously, rather than having to manually perform those workload changes. Same thing goes for Citrix, right? We've been focusing on the fact that most of the user experience from the past decade really has transitioned quite a bit away from the physical endpoint fat client to mobile devices and devices that allow for you to connect from anywhere, on any device, on any network. And that is all certainly focused on an employee experience. But additionally from that introduces such a complex security metric there that you've got to recognize how can we secure a lot of that content and that data and that information, given that the transition to the cloud is really an inevitable move. A lot of that, again, has been influencing where Citrix is going with our own platform and how we're supporting businesses like yourselves to make those adjustments to be as profitable and productive into the future. So next slide. This is a map that IDC has produced given the layout of the 2020 year of the pandemic. And I think this can relate to anyone on the phone call, whether you're with Citrix or any other institution we have on here, that this bit of a roller coaster ride that we've been on that is hopeful for that upward trajectory to the right to enter that next normal. As I wish I had paid attention better in my French classes in my earlier years of education, but I heard that quite often, of a new normal and the next normal. What is the next normal going to look like? And how can we recognize this trajectory in a particular layout of the general understanding of the way this is actually going to carry out. I hope and I believe that in your situation over in the EU, it looks as though that this trajectory will continue up in the right. In America, we may see another roller coaster dip, but we'll see. We're hopeful for not seeing too much of an impact there. But if we go to the next slide, I want to indicate the impact that we hope to have in competition or combat with the COVID-19 impact. So technology investments can flatten this curve. This curve is immensely impacting to any business, any revenue generating engine that's looking to ensure that they have resiliency as a business that allows for profitability, if not just remaining even, possibly finding actual other areas and arenas of profitability given the layout and the situation at hand that is handing us a whole new normal as we exit the pandemic. So if we continue to the next slide. A lot of the difficulties I think that were realized, or we as Citrix have preached about for many, many years, but were realized in a very accelerated and condensed time frame, is that technology is so very complicated. If you like it to an IT professional, there's a vast education that we all have just living in this space day in and day out. But for the average user and the average employee, it's incredibly complex in order to just do your day-to-day operations. So you think about the average employee, these are statistical metrics, 3+ devices that they use daily, 4+ applications they leverage daily to do their corporate work. They have 3+ locations regularly throughout the given annual year, switches context every 2 minutes, context being applications, possibly even files and data and sources of access, whether that's devices or networks. Spends 20% of their time searching for content. If you think about the magnitude of 20% of a given day, it's quite immense. And further from there, they only use 10 to 15% of app functionality of those apps they eventually get to, or content they eventually access after 20 minutes or 20% of their time searching. And then on top of that, I think we all can feel this in our consumer lives as well. Need to remember 6+ passwords across 25+ accounts. Again, I think this in fact relates to the banking sector, as we all continually need to remember our passwords into every single banking and financial services system that we are subscribed to as a consumer. It becomes monotonous and tedious to continue to work through those complexities. So next slide. So as we know it, remote working is here to stay. And I think that we all can agree here on this call that this is something that needs to be understood, embraced, and accepted. How all businesses are going to respond to said remote working is up to, as this will continue to develop, right? So what we do know is the move to remote work, it has been accelerating for years. But even then, it was something that was afforded to a really small subset of employees, rather small. And so that small percentage of people that were able to work remotely, they were usually given a laptop or a VPN or a VDI to access from. And then they were able to do their work from home or other locations wherever they saw fit. Everyone else needed to come into the office to get their work done. And there was a bit of a persona understanding of the only way that you're actually performing your work and getting work done, this is the presenteeism construct, is if you were present at work. Otherwise, you were slacking off or you weren't producing as much in a remote or home work design. And that wasn't very much of an accepted norm. In this new normal, or our normal throughout 2020, I think many of us, from what we've understood from any of our clients, have recognized how productive our employees can be from home. And not just the design of the way they worked before, but adding in additional components and additional measures of productivity, proving that they're potentially, in many cases, more productive than before. So not only is it required based off the science and the situation at hand as we understand life and death scenarios here, but additionally for businesses, they see the incentive to keep workers working remote because it's proving to be more profitable and productive than they saw before. What is the difficulty when we start to address that? How do we support it? How do we secure it? Certainly in this sector, there is no wiggle room for compliance when it comes to your personal PCI data and your client's personal identification information. There is absolutely no wiggle room to try to adapt this to this new normal without securing it from a very lengthy effort to ensure that you have the most aggressive security postures possible while ensuring production is still up and to the right. So one of the Gartner surveys that we took and like to speak to, given the situation at hand, and this could be a little dated, I think this is probably a few months back at this point, so the percentage could be adjusted, but at that time, 82% of company leaders plan to allow employees to work remotely some of the time. As this has generated more traction and popularity, I think that is not just going to be some of the time, but a little bit more of an all of the time, or potentially more companies are seeing that same trajectory and path, certainly in your space or possibly yourselves as well. A lot of these efforts are going to be featured in kind of the following slides here, but much of it is to ensure better processes, ensure productivity, and recognizing that over the last few months, but also to help people avoid fatigue and burnout is an area where there's a lot of focus, whether that's understanding when they're remote and when they're not, or if they're 100% remote. We're seeing a lot of the backlash of that coming into play, and we'll speak to that as well. And what are your solution scenarios where you can enable this remote working is here to stay, but empower the employee through employee experience to ensure that they do not experience any sort of mental fatigue or burnout scenarios, which is related to wellness, employee wellness, right? So next slide. So as we know, I've just walked through many of the benefits that both employees and organizations can come out of remote working, but here are some additional ones that I do believe, from what I've understood from those that are your Citrix account representatives as well as Surge, is that there's new opportunities and untapped pools of workers. And I understand that you all are considering this, if not already employing it. Killing the commute is incredibly affordable when it comes to sustainability metrics that everybody is putting into place, certainly in the banking segment. No matter where you are in the globe, this is number 1, 2, or 3 on the key focus areas and must attend tos in the given year of 2021. Better work-life balance, economic impact, and environmental impact. A lot of those are sustainability metrics that we can get into. Again, these are strictly just general market trends. We haven't even entered into the banking trends that we've seen. So next slide. Again, then the stress and the anxiety comes into play from any IT professional that's trying to understand how do we ensure the business priorities being what they are while still maintaining a secure framework for access for our employees, protection of employee personal information, but certainly your customer information, which all resides in your data repositories at rest and in transit. So we're talking wherever the apps may live. Most of them, from what I understand, are on-premise, and they will remain on-premise for the foreseeable future. But trajectory towards the cloud and leveraging SaaS-based systems and leveraging infrastructure as a service of those public clouds that we all know well, those are on the horizon for you all. So how do we ensure that those direction towards a less friction-rich framework are enabled with security policies that meets the mandates as well as the compliance requirements within your own organization? Next slide. Great. So as we have walked through the general market trends, how do those relate to the banking trends, banking sector trends, and how do those potentially influence banking sector trends? Next slide. So the first area we would focus on, and I think most of our banks that we support within Citrix focus on, is their branch facility locations, and whether that's a ramping up or a ramping down or a complete reorganization of what branches are and what they consist of. So some of the trends that we're seeing here on the left within the branches segment is there's an acceleration to the digital channel, away from cash. A cashless society is not too far in our future. You all may agree or disagree. It's still debatable. I believe so. Demographic evolution, demographic of a general banker, very much a new makeup of bankers, new makeup of banking services through fintechs and open banking ecosystems that we're recognizing. Digital channel preferences rather than in-person live interactions, although there is still a good portion of individuals that still want to have that interaction with their local bank. Social expectations of branches are evolving. Reimagine branch value. What is the value that anyone recognizes when arriving at a branch to perform their financial services needs? And consumer experience expectations are evolving. I think much of this is what we are yielding from a lot of our own banking and financial services clients, and recognizing in our own personal experiences that we can relate to this. So the trends that you're recognizing on the left, I hope we can all agree that those are what you're seeing as well. Now, the imagine ifs are areas where I think we can explore further together as a joint partnership in evolution of banking with Citrix is involved. So imagine if branches offered consumers an experience rather than a transaction. Branches could dynamically and effectively pop up and pop down. There's a lot of traction around that right now. Employees could leverage branches as a distributed place to work. Here in America, Capital One has already started to do that, or even a daycare. This is up and coming in Spain, apparently, that they will then create greater services for the experience that we all may have in the future, which is essentially working from home while having a kid crying right next to you. It's not feasible. What could be new services that are introduced to gain traction, profitability, and production for servicing clients while also servicing the bank's business? Employee experience could enable banker experiences rather than constrain them. Again, we'll get into that as we continue. And banks could invest in spaces that facilitates full service interaction rather than just digitally enabled personalized experiences. That will also be the trajectory forward as well, but not to completely divorce ourselves from the personalized experiences, but having a mix of full service and digital service as well. The next segment that we would focus on is employee experience, the new way to work. And we've heard about this morning. As I said, I think I heard the new normal. What does that look like in the banking sector? Here's some trends that we're recognizing across the globe. Reimagining the workforce. What does the workforce really look like? Employee experience is critical. And this is not just in banking. I think across all segments of industry and all of those that are leading the business trajectory forward within those segments of industry recognize that their bottom line of their balance sheet is indicative of how their employees are experiencing their work. If they're empowered and enabled, they produce better. And at the end, the business produces better. Simplistic productivity, removing a lot of the ancillary login credential situations that cause difficulty and pain to the user to actually access what they need to do to be productive. And then a global talent pool that's expanding readily. And I think that's something that many customers of ours are recognizing benefits from, considering the gig worker and the diverse talent pools. So if we move over to the imagine if side, productivity, imagine if productivity didn't have so many dependencies, that work-life integration was no longer an unfulfilled promise. Banks could leverage pools of human capital dynamically and effectively and securely, as we talked about earlier. Embracing the gig worker pool for call centers, preserving the want and need for humanization of the experience. This is still something that most anybody who's recognizing the aggressive acceleration of change in banking wants to hold on to. We can't completely remove ourselves from the human element of banking that relates to our ancestors' experience at Fed Bank. There's a lot of connection there that makes the experience as a consumer very special. And then bank staff all had a concierge, an administrative staff app to do it all, handling a lot of those trivial tasks that get in the way at many stages of just doing their daily work. Next one, and we'll move into the next phase. I know we're tight on time, but the next one we want to recognize, of course, is simplification and performance. At the end of the day, it's really about these two elements. Simplifying the user experience, the consumer experience is always going to provide better performance, not only just for your employees, but your business and the consumer's business, which is their finances with you. So let's consume rather than build and operate. That's a generating trend. Again, this is related to cloud services and SaaS services and alike. I recognize that that's a little bit of a hampering concept right now within France. But as we continue to go through this, there's ways to create together, I believe. Value-based technology investment, investing into technologies that provide value rather than just satisfy the current need. And rationalization. So imagine if provision of workspace services were infinitely simpler than today, and you consume, you don't build, you consume predefined workplace or workspace experiences. Employee experiences were less dependent on infrastructure, no constraints. You could break free from technology like VPN, BDI, and UEM. We were right, consolidation is easy with reduced cost and simplified service delivery. And you are already entitled and able to consolidate and simplify now. So you're purpose-built to do a lot of these adaptability metrics and rationalization movements throughout the duration of what are going to be incremental disaster recovery or business continuity situational developments throughout the forthcoming years. I think we've all learned a lesson through this pandemic to understand how do we prepare for that better. So if we go to the next slide, this is a bit of a summarization slide in what are the future of banking opportunities and challenges in 2021 and beyond. Major attention is environmental sustainability. Definitely questions and feedback or rebuttal against that as we come to question segments, but that we're seeing this everywhere. And very importantly, right? Human sustainability, burnout prevention. A lot of this is developing based on obviously everybody kind of feeling a little bit isolated in their homes and in a different format, being, you know, maybe being a trader and you've got multiple screens plus the market numbers running on the television screen above you. You just have to recreate that in a very isolated, independent setting. Are you as productive? Are you burnt out faster? Cybersecurity, of course, growing open banking ecosystem. We can talk about that possibly in another segment, but that's absolutely gaining incredible amounts of traction. And then acceleration to digital transformation. Again, this is not just internalizing it into the bank's experience, but your consumers' experiences too. How do we reflect that on both sides to ensure there's continuity and seamless experience? I just want to note a couple of items before we move on. That link at the bottom, I can send it to everybody. It's actually just a podcast that I've listened to that's actually produced here in the US, but interviewing anybody and everybody around the world about the future of banking. And this particular episode does a great job of indicating a lot of the key metrics that most banks are paying attention to. So I just wanted to indicate a few of those here. Changes to the tech budget. There are three questions that banks wanted to, that he wanted to have banks indicate their most priority items. So number one, are you going to delay or cancel long-term tech projects? Number two, are you going to invest in tech to drive efficiency? And number three, are you going to invest in innovation? And the results, two out of three of the firms selected one of the three paths, and the rest picked a combination. So two or three of them, and the rest picked a combination. Repositioning projects was their priority, and they were investing in certain areas rather than others. Cyber and cloud are at the top of the list, and this again is across the entire globe. And taking that into account is going to be determinant upon governmental mandates and compliance requirements. But again, it is still continuing to grow in order to accomplish that, given the mandates and the security postures that must be enforced. And how do we work on that together? Data analytics and AI following that, then also blockchain. All of these are really meant for us to educate ourselves in the segment of banking so that we can partner with you in developing a solution that incorporates all of that as much as we can. And again, acceleration to digital transformation. And then the last one, this is interesting. I thought I'd share it. What is keeping bankers up at night leading into 2021? Banks can play a role in supporting society. The responsibility that banks kind of hold now in order to support society of the future in ways that never were thought of before. So responding to government programs, climate change, diversity and inclusion, providers of capital and liquidity supporting society as we come out of this pandemic. And bankers stay up at night being excited about the opportunities before them. Excited yet also worried about making sure that they effectively do it correctly. Those are really, really powerful possibilities and opportunities to execute against, but how do we do it right? And we're right there with you to make sure that we understand this just as well as you guys do. So if we can continue to the next slide. I'm not sure how much time I have left. I want to make sure I get to some of the last couple slides, but this is a little bit of a repeat from earlier. Today's IT challenges in finance, sustainable workforce, work from home, mental health, mobility, and environmental health. All of these are incredibly important and influencing factors within finance. The next slide is an interesting one, is keeping the employees on the road to flow. And I think the collective message here is empowering employees with technology that doesn't drive them into the roots of the ground, but rather drives them into a flexible and modular layout that brings them into the peak of the next phase of whatever we may see come next. So I think, this is intentionally built out to recognize, build out systems and response-enabled programs that allow for you not to be hampered or creating friction in the trajectory of where tomorrow goes. A frictionless experience that allows for, move, shift, and drop deployments into another location that makes better sense at the edge of the Nordics, that makes the best experience for the employee, but also for the particular customers in that given area. Adopting some of that flexibility and agility is incredibly important in understanding how we turn into this new society that operates based off of the technology that's in our hand, given to us from our corporations, that's going to be in our hands at home, on the road, in the office, if we do have days in the office too, and the direction forward for banking. And this is the next slide will give you a bit of an illustration of what I mean by that. So linear planning is what we've always done, certainly in finance, certainly in legal, definitely in healthcare, to avoid complexity and chaos. And if you click the next animation, you'll see the build out of the new dynamic approach ensures, again, that we have an organization that can quickly react to the unforeseen events. In the event something happens during the tactics and shortcomings, you have the ability to shift, the ability to adjust, and the ability to still remain up and capable of performing the tasks at hand. And your employees are able to perform as their role is defined for them and ensure that they maintain employed in their given role because the business isn't being affected. So the next slide, and I'll transition into where Citrix is related to a lot of these conversations. This is really, really important. I think that it has been discussed with me, with the folks that are on the line that support you all from a Citrix side of the house, that human sustainability is incredibly important given this situation. I think we all can attest that it's been quite hard to reevaluate, what's important and how we make sure that we do our lives well, our personal lives well, and our corporate lives well. Mental illness is a major impact on health and well-being in the EU as we know it. It's estimated that 350 million working days are wasted in the EU each year due to stress and depression. And according to, this is dated, but a 2013 study, the total cost of work-related depression in 24 EU countries was estimated close to 620 billion euros per year. Again, don't quote me on that because I'm not sure how that's calculated, but it's certainly a statistic that is agreed to and factual. And in Sweden, if it relates at all to what you guys are seeing, this number is 6 billion euro in 2017. So I think those countries that are, again, in more of a stringent lockdown, or it's not lockdown, a stringent restriction due to GDPR, you're seeing a lot of this incremental difficulty affecting the human candidacy within your organization. So attention to that and recognizing how is your technology affecting the human capital of your companies and the wellness that they experience. We'll get into that. That's definitely a focus within Citrix and the production of our technology that allows for you to have information, analytics, and influence on their satisfaction. And we'll continue from there into the next slide. All right, so I want to make sure that we keep this on time, but this will give you kind of a better representation of why that matters to Citrix and why it matters to you with Citrix partnering with us. So next slide. So imagine if Citrix Workspace was the preferred way to work for 1 billion people. Next slide. So think about the apps that you use on a daily basis as a consumer. So, and this will give you some context of what I mean or what we're really moving towards in our development of our platform. Apps like Google Maps, Uber, or Spotify. Think about how easy and intuitive these apps are to use, and how simple it is to perform the task that you want, that satisfies your personal pleasure with music, that satisfies you getting from point A to point B, from context to context, or provides you seamless direction and carrying you to said next step, right? I want directions. I need a ride. I want to listen to music. Next slide. Now let's think about the apps that you use at work. Complicated, hard to use interfaces. You need to navigate a bunch of menus just to get to the function you're after. And these aren't all just legacy apps. Half of these screenshots are modern SaaS apps as well, which I understand aren't even employed yet within your systems. So you can think about the complexity and the antiquated nature of some of these applications. So you can imagine why employees aren't as productive as they could be, and why they do need some way to help them guide through their simple workflows throughout the day, certainly when they're working from home on a regular basis. And it's not just the experience that's the problem. So if we move on to the next slide, experience is, in fact, a major contributor. We have to think about how we can effectively perform better as an IT organization to provide better employee experience and consumer experience alike in that same given vein. Single sign-on access to apps and data. But as we've mentioned throughout this entire presentation, you cannot usually couple that easily when it comes to a security posture that enables the consumer-like experiences like an Uber application or a Spotify or a Google Maps. So you have to think about the contextual security, and you have to also think about how do we enable it from the way that we're trying to influence the user to move on to their next task or handle tasks on behalf for them through bot management. You have to add some intelligence into the mix. So AI and ML integrated as well. So if we move on to the next slide, I think what we want to make sure that we get across here is with Citrix Workspace Intelligent Experiences, it really gives you guys the opportunity and enables financial services to deliver on those imagine-ifs that we went through earlier. So there's an experience that looks like this for the employee. If you all have not seen this, I imagine you may have, but if you have, bear with me here. This is still the same Workspace app as we've known it for many, many years. And I still have a full set of my applications and files, but I've added some additional capabilities. So firstly, we have a virtual assistant and contextual search at the top right. And we also have a personalized feed that you can see content and workflows appear that are personalized for the user when they need to perform the action on those given experiences, a lot like you recognize in some of those social media interactions that we recognize regularly. You also have a list of frequently used actions like I need to submit my PTO, I need to submit my expense report or approve said expense report if I'm a manager. Quick, actionable items that slide out as a tile from the right and allow for that particular user to handle a small trivial task at hand in a matter of seconds rather than multiple hops into the given application itself. My recently accessed apps and files are still there just as they always have been. And we can create these experiences in micro apps, like I just indicated. So you're no longer needing to go through the process of launching the application itself, signing into it, navigating through the menus just to perform the task at hand. You can do it from this landing page in a small tile, again, that slides out from the right and is architected as a micro app that feeds back to the system of record. Again, it is a very intuitive experience for any user of any technical expertise. What we've also done is recognizing that people will be using other systems like Teams, for instance, as we are today. We've created the embedded experience where you can share updates directly into Teams channels from this landing page rather than jumping into Teams itself in order to get that action done. And you'll be able to see what intelligent looks like when you see any sort of additional demos that you haven't already seen or you have seen in the past, given that. So if you go into the next slide, this is the last one I have for you all before we push it back to Serge. But this is a representation of where we're going. And I think, that was a quick overview of what Citrix Workspace app with intelligence is today. In relation to where it matters for banking and finance is it actually can influence the experience for your bankers, no matter what banking roles that they perform, whether that's even branches as well, digitizing the branch experience, but also can impact the consumer experience as well when we're talking about how do we enable a seamless, quick experience for a given user who's trying to just accomplish one task of moving one bit of funds of money into another account, or maybe a separate bank. Again, as we're continuing to develop this, I think us as an organization, and I'm continuing to motivate everyone internally in product and engineering to recognize the open banking ecosystem is something that we need to understand in respect to the way that we develop and build our own solutions and products. And it's definitely feeding the system that we're building as a platform. So just to indicate, out of the box integrations with the most widely used applications, SaaS-based applications, and those micro apps are already pre-built and templated for anyone to put into place in their own systems. And then there's make your own micro apps with any legacy or homegrown applications. There's an API tool that allows for you simple drag and drop API tooling that allows for you to build micro apps for your internal legacy applications, homegrown applications, what have you. And that allows for you to actually recognize that employee experience impact as well as productivity, efficiency impact from day one. I hope that was helpful to understand where we're thinking about banking and finance, as well as the collective trends across the markets at hand. But I'll hand it back to Serge at this point for any questions related to what I presented.